Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Shining Fates, make sure you go ahead and check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using the code Omnipoke. For today's video, we are looking at another brand new Battle Styles deck, this time going to be centered around the new Corviknight VMAX, as well as the awesome Bronzong as well. So let's jump into that basic concept, and that is that the ability of Bronzong allowing us to move around our metal energies is going to be fantastic. It means we can, move things off of damaged Pokemon at different situations. It means that we can just chain Brave Blade a little bit easier, and that's going to be the selling point, really. It means that you can jump from Zacian with one switch, jump into a new Zacian and attack with that one, so you don't need to have double shenanigans. And if you sit with Corviknight on board, it naturally has a free retreat, so you can just pivot straight out into that Corviknight and go into your next Zacian. So the idea is that we're chaining 230 or 240 damage each turn, so very, very tempo-based. So quite different to what you know in terms of the tanking builds of Lucario right now. This is going to be playing a much more usual, attack every turn game plan, but at that same time, we still have Mallow Lana's and Cheryl in here as the new supporter to deny a bunch of your opponent's damage to really just win a straight-up race, because we are going to be smacking every turn and undoing damage at the same time. That's really the emphasis here. The reason why we need Corviknight as an evolution, it means it opens up the new Cheryl supporter for that healing, and also Lucario actually isn't bulky enough in the current meta now that ADP has the access to Rusted Sword, and even just Rusted Sword builds of Zacian, just playing things like Berserker and Leon is actually too dangerous for Lucario in the current meta. So it's actually really important to have more hit points, surprisingly, to have even greater bulk in the deck. So the Corviknight is fulfilling that role. Let's jump into the Pokemon then. We are going to be playing a 2-2 line of the Corviknight VMAX. It is, a focal point of the deck, but the good news is we can still have that Lucario core where we have 4 Zacian Vs. So Zacian is still going to be that early game draw power for you, early game acceleration, which you can then metal transfer all over your board, which is fantastic. And let's face it, Brave Blade is still a fantastic attack for you. So we only need to really fall back on the Corviknight. We don't need to get it up on turn 2 like many other VMAX decks, so we can get away with just a 2-2 line. However, like I said, jumping up to 320 hit points is fantastic. Having that Lustrous Body ability as well, preventing all effects of your opponent's Pokemon's abilities done to this Pokemon is fantastic as well. It means even like Poison Eternatus or even Crobat VMAX trying to use annoying shenanigans with Poison and like Toxicroak to ramp up that damage, you're not too concerned about that, which is fantastic. Also, it means that with coating Metal Energy, especially against fire decks, just a Tech Giratina isn't going to wreck you because you're protected with that ability. So Corviknight, super tanky, raw hit points of 320, plus the reduction of Goggles, plus the reduction of Full Metal Wool, which we are still playing in the deck, means it's going to be sticking around for a good amount of time, that's for certain. It does have that G-Max Hurricane attack, very similar to Brave Blade, really. You do 240, then you can't use it the following turn. Much easier for Corviknight, though, because it just has a natural free retreat, and if you have your Metal Transfer on the board, you can just free retreat, transfer it all to a Zacian, or transfer it all to a Lucario to finish things off. So that's really going to be fantastic for you. The idea is to really only get up one Corviknight in each game, so that's why we're sticking with a 2-2 line. The deck can function without Corviknight in some matchups, but typically you'll try and get it in play. The regular V does have Clutch, which can prevent retreating, which can be annoying for some specific archetypes, especially if they're playing some like Air Balloon shenanigans for just some lead-out Pokemon. And you also have that Sky Hurricane, which can do 190 as well. So even if you are just moving in between Brave Blade and you have to Sky Hurricane just to pivot, that can be reasonable as well for you if needs be. And let's face it, the 210 raw hit points again gets jumped way up with the Full Metal Wool and that Goggles as well. So even the regular V is fairly tanky. From there, we play a 3-2 line of Bronzong. You want to be playing the team-up Bronzor because it has evolutionary advantage, meaning that if you go second, you can evolve immediately into Bronzong. That can actually mean that you have some wacky high roll moments where if you're able to, Dedenne change and research and find a couple sources early on, you could then like Metal Transfer and get a turn 1 Brave Blade or a turn 1 Sky Hurricane or a turn 1 Full Metal Wool GX relatively okay. It means that you don't need to find a switch out. You just need to, if you get into the Bronzong instead, it means you can just push all those energies like straight up to the front and just swing with Brave Blade. So some random high rolls there, but for the most part, it's so that we can move energies between Zacian and Corviknight VMAX so that we have easy maintenance of attacks. It means you can quite easily commit 2 energies to full Metal Wall with no downside, because Luke Metal takes a hit, then you can just find a switch out, Metal Transfer it straight onto Zacian, and immediately you're swinging. So much faster tempo than current Luke Metal, where you can use your full Metal Wall GX attack and then you're still spending turns, sitting behind dolls, Intrepid Swording, trying to hit edges off those top 3. Whereas here, we're going to have a much more usual approach in terms of trying to research between turns, trying to Dedenne change in those opening stages, get set up on the board, and then use that Metal Transfer to never lose out on attacks. As long as our guys aren't getting knocked out, we should have a steady flow of energies, and because we can move all those around so easily, we're always attacking. And the best part is, even if people are knocking out Bronzong, it means they're putting Corviknight or Zacian back to the bench, so then they naturally become active, and you've reset the GMAX Hurricane, or you've reset the Brave Blade. So the Bronzong doesn't need to be a super thick line. He just kind of chills on the board. He's tanky anyway, So yeah, very, very strong ability, great synergy in the deck. It makes that full Metal Wall, really, really advantageous for you as well. Even Steel Fist becomes a good option just for getting energies into play, because then you can move them straight onto your other guys. So yeah, excellent card. Like I said, Team Up Bronzor is the way to go for now. Outside of that, we just played 2 copies of the Dedenne GX. You don't want to be feeding your opponent too many easy prizes. So we're not playing like Eldegoss or Crobat, anything like that. We're just playing Dedennes. I feel like this is the best choice here. I feel like having one scares me just because of prize factor. So we are going to play the 2 copies just that we don't brick off of early hands, and Quick Ball is usually going to be an out for us to escape bricks. But you don't really want to put many of these into play unless you're pushing for game in the later stages. So usually you're just going to try and put 1 into play if you can help it, for the most part. And I prefer this to like Crobat just for discard synergy for early metal energies. That's the main idea, because we are, of course, still using sources to protect around crushing hammers or early knockouts from your opponent's side. So those are all things to bear in mind for the Pokemon, really. It's not quite the same as a straight up Luke Metal, where you try and give up that tag team and then only have V Pokemon to give up, because there is the Bronzong, there is the 3 prize Luke Metal. They could go for like Luke Metal to Dedenne Bronzong as their prize map, and they could, ignore Corviknight and Zacian. But for the most part, that's forcing a ton of bosses from the opponent when we're putting a ton of pressure on them all the time, and they're never really affecting your attacker. So that's always going to be okay for you for the most part. One thing you will notice as well, we're not playing Mew in here. Yes, I do think that Rapid Strike Urshifu is going to be a very good card, but specifically for this deck, we're not playing the Mew in here because we are playing a high count of Metal Goggles, and if you goggle your Bronzong, you then stay out of range of 1 snipe, and you already have the goggles on, so you're not getting Zigzagoon pinged into range either. So yeah, really nice just to play that instead of Mew, and you can then focus on getting your core Pokemon into play regardless, and just move along with your strategy, especially because Goggles doesn't change too much math on your Zacians and on your Corviknight in that matchup anyway, in terms of how many hits it takes them to knock out your Pokemon. So yeah, a perfect place for Goggles in that matchup is going to be on your Bronzong. So just remember that when you go into that matchup. Onto the trainers then, we are playing for tools 3 copies of that Metal Goggles, just like you would see in Luke Metal Zacian, really. You want to get it early established onto Zacians, onto Luke Metal, so they are tanking those initial energies. You don't want them to be wiped off the board if you can help it, because they just get more and more useful as the game progresses, as you build up your board state. We are playing 1 Chaotic Swell. We are still slightly scared of Blounds that can go over the top and take a big 1-hit KO. Not least because of their weakness. We are playing Coatings, of course, but we are still a little bit scared in that regard. So Swell going to help out there and just protect against random Prism Star stadiums and stuff like that from all sorts of archetypes. Not committing too much more to that stadium because I don't think it's all that relevant for us. Just like you've seen with Luke Metal, typically they play 1 Swell, sometimes no stadium, sometimes like Power Plants. But at the moment we're playing 2 Dedenne, so we want to have the Swell here. I'm playing 1 Tag Call just for an extra out to early game. Luke Metal, as well as allowing us to access Mallow Lana, which is still played in this deck because it can be a nice switch reset for you, especially for your Zacians. And Luke Metal is often, in the firing line, and then you're going to pivot straight out of him and protect those energies. So the Tag Call, just a nice out here, mostly to get Mallow Lanas. Then we have the rest of the search cards, the comms and the quick balls to get our Pokemon out. We're playing Force Saucer for early game acceleration. Again, tempo, you can get turn 1 attacks with Brave Blade. In random situations, if you just get those early sources and a switch out, or if you get those early sources as well as Bronzor into Bronzong. And then we are playing 3 copies of Switch. It's a little bit greedy not to be playing the full 4 count, but bear in mind, Corviknight has that natural free retreat for you, which is great. And we have Tag Called double Mallow Lana in here as well, so we do have 5 effective outs And we have had to cut some corners here and there because we are playing multiple stage 1s, that sort of thing, so just bear that in mind. Onto the supporters then. It's a slightly wacky count, and I am still experimenting with this. There's things that I really like about this count and things that I kind of want to change about this count as well. So this isn't a set in stone count, and I think everything up to now I've been very confident in the numbers. Here you can see that I'm going a bit experimental still because there's a lot of 2 counts going on, and we are playing Cynthia Caitlin to try and wrap that all up in a bow and make the most out of the right supporters in each situation. So we are playing 1 Sinlin. Again, it's just a tag call out, so it's just an extra way of getting into draw if you really need to. Then we play the 2 Mallow Lanas, still great with Zacian, still great with Lucametal. 2 Cheryls are thrown in from the new set. They heal all damage from each of your evolution Pokemon. If you do, discard all energy from the Pokemon that were healed. So the natural combo is that you Bronzong off of Corviknight, you Cheryl heal the Corviknight, nothing gets discarded. You Bronzong them all straight back on to Corviknight as if nothing's happened. So it's effectively a max potion, but in a supporter form. And if we happen to high roll double Corviknight VMAX, you could double heal at the same time. But typically, 1 is enough for you. Buying back an entire turn off the opponent and then smacking them again for another 230, 240 damage is very threatening. So yeah, a lot of healing going on in here. Mallow Lana also obviously is switch outs, which is, again, is super important. Only 2 copies of Boss's Orders. That's kind of the thing that scares me the most because it is going to be, sometimes important to finish things off that you are 2-shotting. We are playing a lot of research. We are playing a lot of Dedenne, and you will be using those in a lot of situations. We are having the Sinlin in here to try and be that, pseudo third boss, but also a pseudo Cheryl, Mallow Lana, Marnie. So kind of greedy to play this Sinlin, but I just think the extra outward tag call and just the fact that Marnie's more important than boss in certain matchups is really important, and healing at the right time is also super important. So I like Sinlin being that sort of third copy of whichever one you need here, even though we're playing 4 2-ofs. So that's kind of the basis here. But yeah, Boss's Orders, obviously a fantastic card. Knocking out V Pokemon, knocking out Crobats, Dedennes, it can so easily be a win condition, finishing things off that you've been 2-shotting. But, at the same time, Cheryl and Mallow Lana is like just as much of a win condition as Boss in a lot of situations, just because you're undoing turns, whereas Boss is sort of accelerating your win condition in a different way. All of these sort of greed supporters, the 6 that we are playing right now, all sort of lead towards that same goal of being a power spike turn. That's really the hope. We're still playing 2 copies of Marnie. Got to keep some decks' hand sizes in check, things like Blounds, any welder deck in general. So the Swell and the double Marnie, trying to make that a little bit more reasonable for you, as well as having Sinlin to maybe get back a Marnie if you are able to access one early. That's kind of the hope here. And then 4 research because it's just an insanely good card and still has synergy with your sources. So maxing out copies of that. 2 odds for a bunch of others. Let me know your favorite. Would you, go down to 1 copy of Mallow Lana, play a third boss? Would you go down to 1 Marnie? Can you see only playing 1 Cheryl? It's kind of wacky to do that, but then keeping, maybe leaning more into the tag call package could be reasonable. I'd like to hear your thoughts because, again, it's a tight deck list and there are some cut corners, to be honest, to make the archetype work for you. Onto the energy, we are playing 11 total. We're playing 2 coating, obviously really important on mostly your Corviknight, but also on Zacians in those early stages, and also 9 basic metal. You want to still have a good flow of these. You want them to be discarded with Dedennes researches for, again, early game tempo for your sources. Yeah, that's really the whole idea. And you want to hit them off Intrepid Sword and spots as well. So that gives us plenty to use, even if we are getting hit with hammers and things are getting knocked out. We should be able to make it over the line. In a lot of situations, these end up becoming like kind of dead cards, but you still just want to have access in the early stages. I could see you eating into this count a little bit, but then it kind of makes me wary about playing like 4 sources. Maybe you drop down to 3 or something like that, or just play a completely slower game plan and just forego source altogether. That kind of makes me nervous, so I haven't gone for that right now. I'm still very much trying to play on that tempo side of things, but I could see this getting even more defensive and wonky with its energy counts. So here's the full list then. Pause now if you want to, and I will always have the description, the list in the description below as well. Onto tech options then. You can go for, if you're not happy with the double Dedenne, you could go 1 Dedenne, 1 Crobat. You could also weave in Eldegoss, especially when I have so many 2-of supporters. You could definitely go down that route to have additional effects with that happy match. Zamazenta is obviously something that you see a lot of in the Lucametal builds. Typically, I'm thinking that, against things like a Turner, you're trying to build up that Corviknight now, of course. You still have that Luke Metal for early game energy discards against a Turner, which is really annoying for them. And essentially, we're just trying to bring the game to them much faster. The Assault Tackle is low pressure, low damage output. Yes, it does weave into Brave Blade reasonably well, and you do have Bronzong to sort of move between Zama and Zacian. But again, we're not playing that many switch outs already in the deck, so that would start eating away at you. And it's kind of dead in a lot of situations anyway. Obviously, Center Scorch and Victini VMAX, they're not too worried about Zamazenta. They have other ways to deal with it. So I basically see Zama as essentially just helping out only a Turner, because even, single strike wall breaks, so it gets through Zamazenta regardless, and you just have lower hit points. It's really poor against, it's pretty good against Rapid Strike Urshi, but I think your win condition is more so protecting your Bronzong in that matchup anyway. So Assault Tackle, again, is just kind of low pressure for you, and I think you'd be better off just trying to go aggressive with Zacian and Corviknight anyway. And again, the list is tight. Where do you find the space for the extra one of Zamazenta without eating into like your Zacian count, which is then hurting your draw power overall and making you have less powerful early game turns? So that's why it's not really in here right now. The other thing I would think about is leaning more so into the tag call package. At the moment, we've seen many Luke Metals only play one tag call and then like one Mallow Lana or two Mallow Lana and one Sinnin, like I'm playing right now, or just two Mallow Lana on their own. So I've sort of taken inspiration from that. But if you do want to lean more so into that tag call package, Guzhala does open itself up. You could then think about putting a Rusty Sword in here for your Zacian to, again, just reach better numbers on certain things, especially tag team Pokemon. You can think about playing like one Air Balloon as well, getting a bit techie with the list, but that would sort of open itself up if you do want to go down a thicker tag call package, maybe have double Luke Metal, double tag call, that sort of thing. Definitely is worth thinking about if you want to make Bronzong and Corviknight more sort of tech-based and lean more towards the old traditional route, is something I've thought about. And at the same time, trying to weave together these random 2-of supporters that we're playing, maybe Pokegear is something you could think about just to try and fish at the right time, because really it is super important to have the Cheryl on the right turn, have the Mallow Lana at the right turn, because there is, windows of opportunity that your opponent can then punish you if you whiff it. And we are still in a heavy Marnie meta. It will be happening a lot to you, so having gears maybe to fish at the right time could be helpful for you. It's really just me shrugging and saying, where's the space at the moment, which is stopping me from playing these cards. I already have cut some corners. I do feel like you could get away with maybe like 1 or 2 less energies, 1 or 2 less sources, maybe just play the 3 count instead. Because again, once 3 are established on the board, and if your tanking is going the way you want it to go, it's fine and you don't have to worry too much. But at the moment, I'm just trying to go, again, tempo-based is just one of my playstyle kind of options that I like to have available. But I have tested gears in here and they've been okay. They give you a lot of decent outs, so things to bear in mind there. Onto the matchup overview, I think the future is looking bright for Corviknight Bronzong. I do have high hopes for the archetype. Obviously, there's going to be the new Victini VMAX, as well as the Center Scorch VMAX and Blacephalon/Tempozard. We are doing a couple of things here. We're playing 2 Marnies. We are playing Swell. So it's not like we're completely dead in the water, but things can get dicey at times, especially if we don't find those early game energies, coating energies, and we don't have the Guzhala to fish them out. So if you are expecting a lot of fire in the next meta, I would think about leaning more towards that tag call package, maybe doubling up on the tag call, adding in Guzhala, or just, again, switching the counts to have more coating metals in the deck to give yourself some extra protection there. Regardless, I do think that just early game Charizard is a problem for you. Early game Blacephalon, if they do piece things together, can be pretty scary. So all things to bear in mind. And then it's Ditto Welder Box. I know I'm kind of just saying that like fire is bad for you, but it's more so just the fact that you don't have early game protection of your energy cards. That's the thing that I'm most afraid of, to be honest, because you just don't get on the board quite as quickly as a lot of other decks, because you don't want to put down multiple Dedennes, especially in these matchups, because they can oftentimes play things like Cramorant and take easy snipes all over the board. So I'm just terrified that your early Zacians go down, and in a lot of situations you need that Zacian to stay in play for a turn, or you need that Luke Metal to stay in play for a turn, because then you can pivot those energies off onto Corviknight, and that's when you start feeling really safe and really strong as an archetype, because the Corviknight is just so robust from that point on. You know that you've got yourself a free turn to, where things aren't going to get knocked out outside of bossing things that you're not too concerned about regardless. So it's those sort of sketchy opening turns that you'll definitely have against the fire decks. Even if you are playing coating metal energies, it's still going to be sketchy in those opening turns, because Center Scorch can quite easily deal with a Zacian. Tempozard can deal with a Zacian just with, early Flare Blitz or whatever. So tons of things to be slightly concerned about there. And I do feel like Fire will still be reasonable in the format. Your fingers crossed hope is that Rapid Strike Urshi is going to be playing a lot of Empoleon and is going to at least be checking a lot of these Fire-type decks. Obviously not really the case for Blacephalon or Crystal Blounds or whatever you want to call it. That's really the only thing that I think is a glaring weakness. Outside of that, I think you're okay against a lot of things, to be honest. Your damage output isn't amazing into VMAXs. There's essentially a lot of like wasted damage in theory, but at the same time, you're wasting so much of their damage just by instantly healing with Cheryl or using your Mallow Lana as well. So I'm not too concerned in that regard. And at the same time, into some VMAXs, you can be doing the old Steel Fist to set up Zacian and to set up Corviknight as well. So maybe it's not all that bad. On to the closing thoughts then. I do think that timing is going to be crucial, and I am slightly concerned about the amount of Marnie in the meta when we are trying to play multiple stage 1s and get things, get into a really powerful board state where it's just very difficult for your opponent to deal with. This can get shut down just by early Marnies. Yes, we have Intrepidal to fall back on, and that's what makes me kind of confident that this deck will still work, but there are also sort of turns where you absolutely must heal, and we don't have the highest number of outs to make that happen. You don't necessarily want to put that second Dedenne down to push for those sorts of things, but you can if needs must. But overall, I'm optimistic for this sort of archetype. I'm not necessarily sure that this exact 60 will be the one taking over Lucametal, but I do think Lucametal will be adapting to the new format. I think naturally just hiding behind Zama is getting less and less effective now that we have Single Strike Urshi that can just wall break that straight away, and you really don't have much chance against that archetype right now. Dolls get much worse as well in the format just because of the virtue of Escape Rope. So there's a lot of reasons. Oh, and of course, Rusted Sword is making ADP and Rusty Zacian a kind of bad matchup for current builds of Lucametal. So I can certainly see it looking to branch out, and I feel like having a more tempo-based approach makes a lot of sense now that we have Bronzong available. So let me know your thoughts on this list. Let me know what you think about Corviknight Bronzong in general. Do you think it's going to be too clunky to keep up? Or do you think this is going to be the best tanking deck available in the future? I'll hear your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.